Hi, folks. So, Jesus f***ing Christ!
I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that were brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't have been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery in the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel, and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have black people in here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I was never a slave. It's like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old, you're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices? Be content with whatever situation you were born into and make the most of it. God's not limited to your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think.
Did you all just hear what I heard? What?
Well, I'm not saying it's okay, but if the Africans who were enslaved in America were still in Africa, they'd be following the voodoo and then they'd be in hell. But at least they got to go to heaven.
After they were enslaved under horrible and torturous conditions their entire lives. But you know what? At least they're in heaven now. Because thankfully, through slavery, they found God.
Huh?
And what's this part about, no one now has ever been a slave? Has this man never heard of generational trauma? Does he think that the repercussions of slavery still aren't evident today with our prison system and how black people are treated in this country simply based on the color of their skin? For him not to know what he's talking about and for him to actually think what he's saying is the gospel of the Lord is pure 100% stinking white privilege. He is so privileged, he doesn't even know how far up his ass his head is. Make the best of whatever situation you were born in, and that's it? Could you imagine if humans did that throughout history? There would be no advancement. And no, black people should not just take what they're given and be happy with it. You know who says that? Straight white men. Because this country was built and is still run for them. And there is no political party who caters more to the white privileged man than the Republican Party. So please continue to vote them out by continuing to vote blue.